This is the answer key explanation for week 8 worksheet, solving exponential growth and decay problems. Okay, so when you're dealing with exponential growth, you're going to have 1 plus the r, and all these first 5 problems are growth, so I have that written. A is your beginning amount, r is your rate as a decimal, and t is time. So when they said the original value of an investment was $1,400, I'm going to put that as my beginning amount. They said the rate is increasing, that's why it's growth, and it's talking about 9%. Now, when you're dealing with the rate, you cannot use that 9 until you have changed it into a decimal. And one of the ways to do that is just to do 9 divided by 100, or you can move the decimal 2 places to the left. But this gave me 0.09. Now, T stands for time in years. They asked us what the value is going to be after 25 years, so that's my T value. So I would plug this in. My A value, we said, was 1,400. 1 plus my rate, well, my rate was 0.09, and this is being raised to the 25th power. So the only other thing I'm going to do to this equation is to simplify what's inside the parentheses. So all I did was add those numbers together, and now I can type this in my calculator. So 1400 times 1.09 to the 25th power. And this time we are talking about money, so it makes sense to round to 2 decimal places. So I would say that the answer is 12,072.31. This is going to stay a 1 because the number right after it is not 5 or higher. So this is our answer. Number 2. The cost of tuition at a college is $12,000. That's our beginning amount. It's increasing at 6%. So when I take 6%, if I do 6 divided by 100, that is going to equal 0.06. And T talks about the time in years. They said 4 years. So all we've got to do is plug this in. Y equals 12,000 times 1 plus the rate, and it's being raised to the 4th power. So all I did was plug in my A value, my R value, and my T value. So Y is equal to 12,000 times 1.06 to the 4th power. We are talking about money again, so it would make sense to do 2 decimal places. And I've got 1.06 to the 4th power. Hit enter. Okay, so 2 decimals. That would be 15,149.72. It stays at 2 because the number right after it was less than 5. Number 3. The number of student athletes at a local high school is 300, so that's our beginning amount. And it's increasing at a rate of 8% per year. So when we do 8%, remember you've got to divide it by 100 so that you are using 0.08 for your R value. And T stands for time, well, they said 5 years. So when I plug this in, my A value is 300, so that goes first. My R value is 0.08. And then I've got it to the 5th power. Now I squished that together because I accidentally started adding it in my head, but it would be 1.08 to the 5th power like that when you add those numbers together. Now this one is not talking about money, it's talking about population or student athletes, so it does not make sense to have decimals. We're going to round to a whole number. And it looks like we're going to have 441 because the number right after the decimal was bigger than 5. So 441 student athletes or whatever. When you enter your answers on Canvas, you do not need to worry about labels. Number 4. In 1985, there were 285 cell phone subscribers in Saginaw. The number of subscribers increased by 75% after the year 1985. So how many subscribers were in Saginaw in 2008? So the original amount was 285. They said it's increasing by 75%. And if you do 75 divided by 100, you will get 0.75. And the T value talks about time in years. Now, this is the first time on this assignment they haven't told us how many years, but they did say that we're starting off in 1985 and they want to know about what's going to happen in 2008. So to figure out how many years have gone by, I do 2008 minus 1985 to see that number. That is 23. So that is my T value right here. I would plug it in. y is equal to 285 times 1 plus the 0.75 to the 23rd power. I'm going to go ahead and add those numbers together inside my parentheses so that it's 1.75 and I raise it to the 23rd power. This time we're talking about cell phone subscribers, so it doesn't make sense to have that one as decimals. We are going to round to the whole. Just in case it froze when I was saying that, we are going to round to a whole number on this one because we're talking about cell phone subscribers and it wouldn't make sense to be a decimal. Whew, that number got big very, very fast. So 110845988. And I always like to start at the end, go 3 numbers up, put a comma, 3 numbers up, put a comma. There's your number. And number 5. The population of a small town is 1,600 and it's increasing at a rate of 3% per year. So we've got 1,600, 3%. Well, remember, whenever you're dealing with the percentage, you need to make sure that you divide it by 100 first. That's 0.03. Okay. Now, T is talking about time in years. This time they actually told us the number of years, so we've got our answer. So let's do 1 plus the 0.03 to the 10th power. So y is equal to 1,600 times 1.03 to the 10th power. Let's type this in. And we're talking about population, so let's not have any decimals in here. This would be 2,150 people. Now, the reason that it didn't change to 51 is because the number right after the decimal is less than 5. So now we're dealing with the exponential decay problems, and the only difference is that there's a minus sign instead of a plus sign. All right, so number 6. The value of a car is 18,000. Okay, we've got 18,000 for our A value. That's how much it starts. And it's depreciating, or its value is decreasing at a rate of 12% per year. So when you do 12%, make sure that you do 12 divided by 100 first, because the number you should actually be using is 0.12. And T is time in years, that's 10 years. Let's plug this in. So I've got 18,000 for my A value, 1 minus the rate, and make sure you're using the decimal, and I bring it to the 10th power. Now, anytime I'm doing subtraction with these decimals, I always like to make sure I So I'm plugging this in to simplify inside my parentheses, which gives me 0.88. So I've got 18,000 times 0.88 to the 10th power. When I type all of that in, hit enter, we are talking about money this time, so it makes sense to have 2 decimals. That would be $5,013 and 0.02 cents. The reason this changed to a 2 is because the number right after it was bigger than 5. Number 7. A farmer buys a tractor for $50,000, so that's going to be how much it was worth originally. If the tractor depreciates 10% per year, so it's losing value, write an exponential decay function for 7 years later. Okay, 10%. Remember, whatever you're doing, when you do 10 divided by 100, it's going to look like this. 0.1. Or you can put 0.10, it is the same thing. Now, T is talking about years, so that's 7, and we are going to plug this in. 50,000 times 1 minus the 0.1 to the T power. Oops, and I'm not plugging in T right there. I need to actually put the time, which they told us was 7 years. Okay, so let's simplify inside those parentheses. 1 minus 0.1, that is 0.9. So I've got y equals 50,000 times 0.9 to the 7th power. Type that in, hit enter. This one's talking about money, so we want 2 decimal places, which means we're looking at 23,914.85. 5 because the number right after it was 5 or higher. Number 8. The population of a town is decreasing at a rate of 1% per year. Okay, so my rate was 1%. They mentioned that first. Make sure that you are very careful about this. 1 divided by 100 is 0.01. And T talks about time. Well, they said that we're talking about in 2000, there were 1,300 people. Write the exponential decay function for whenever the population is in 2008. So that means for the time, we are doing the year 2008 minus the year 2000. So that means we are looking at 8 years. Now, A is how many people there were originally, and they said there were 1,300. So let's plug that in. Like I said, I always like to make sure that I am plugging this into my calculator to double check. That gives me 0.99. So y is equal to 1,300 times 0.99 to the 8th power. We are talking about people, so when we plug this in, we do not want any decimals. Let's round to a whole number. This gives me, this one's going to round to end up being 1,200 people. And I'll explain why. Okay. This number is going to have to go up 1 because the number right after it is 5 or higher. That goes up 1, but since it's a 9, that means this one would go up 1, which means since this one's a 9, that actually means this number goes up 1. And then those turn into zeros. So that's why it is 1,200 people. Number 9. An investment of $8,200 loses value at a rate of 2% per year. So we've got our original value. They said it's losing value, that's why it's decay, and we're talking about 2% for the rate. So 2 divided by 100 is equal to 0.02, and we're talking about 9 years later. So y is equal to 8,200 times 1 minus the 0.02 to the 9th power, and I always want to simplify what's inside my parentheses. So I've got 1 minus 0.02 to the 9th power. So let's get rid of that. I don't need that yet. Just the insides. That's 0.98 to the 9th power. So now I'm going to type this whole thing in. And since it is talking about money, make sure you put the same number of zeros right there. We are going to do 2 decimal places. So $6,836.73. It stays a 3 because the number right after it is lower than 5. Last one, number 10. The population of Haywardsville is decreasing at a rate of 2.5% per year. So I've got 2.5%, which is going to be 2.5 divided by 100. And be very careful because when there's already decimals in there, that's when people start messing up. It's 0.025. Now they said if the population in 2000 was 28,000, what will be the expected population in 2015 if this rate decrease continues? So the original amount of population was 28,000. Now we've got to go from the year 2000 to 2015, which means you're just trying to figure out how many years have gone by, which would be 15 years. So y equals 28,000 times 1 minus my rate, 0.025 to the 15th power. Move that so you can see it. I always simplify what's inside my parentheses first before I try to do anything else. So that's y is equal to 28,000 times 0.975 to the 15th power. Now we are talking about population, so this time whenever I plug this into my calculator, we are going to round to the nearest whole number. So I plug this in, hit enter. That gives me 19,153 people. The reason it changed to 53 is because the number right after the decimal place was 5 or higher, so that number went up 1.